I used to get up in the morning and feel terrorized by my own government. I used to have nightmares about the IRS. That was a real problem for me because, number one, it was also complex and I couldn't be absolutely sure that I wasn't 10 cents off, right? Did I remember everything? And I also never liked the idea of signing up and saying that I am under penalty of perjury that I was a withholding agent when nobody ever told me what a withholding agent was. Well, it turns out after a great deal of research in foreign archives, we found out that a withholding agent, in the case of the IRS forms, is swearing under penalty of perjury that you are a warrant officer in the British Merchant Marine Service. And I knew right there and then that I was not going to sign a 1040 ever again in my life because I would be telling a barefaced lie. And I would be subjecting myself to a 2-year stint in the federal prison for signing that paper. So I haven't filed a federal tax form since 1998. And I have no reason to because I'm not a federal employee. So, people ask me all the time about the IRS. Well, they are presuming that you are operating as a corporation, as a federally chartered corporation, because so far as the public record shows, the only thing with your name on it out there is in international jurisdiction of the sea. So you'll notice that when you get, like when they send out these tax forms and it has pre-printed with your name on it, it's always in capital letters. It's always one of those 3 names that are in capital letters. They're always either trying to tax a public trust, a public estate, or a public transmitting utility. And you're none of the above. In fact, you never knew that these things were being operated in your name. So do you owe any tax? No. Are you a withholding agent? No. No, you're not. And one of the best arguments I ever heard for accusations of non-filing, you know, they always send out these complaints and they say, oh, you're not filing. One of the best answers to failure to file is, oh, I found out what a withholding agent is, and I'm not one. I will swear on a stack of Bibles that I am not a warrant officer in the British Merchant Marines. I will guarantee that. And by the way, trying to force me to file anything that said I was under penalty of perjury would be an inducement to criminal activity. So that just shuts down all these failure to file ideas right there. I'm not in the British Merchant Marines, I'm sorry. You must have someone else in mind. Oh, could you be talking about this corporation that I also have control of? See my certificate of assumed name? Now, just remember what I said about Congressman Louis T. McFadden and his complaint before the House Banking Committee and before the House Judiciary Committee, which still hasn't been acted on since 1934, by the way. He called it unlawful conversion. So what I'm encouraging all of you to do is a lawful conversion. Each one of us individually can take back what they stole from us. We can take back our good name. And when we're talking about the good name, we're talking about the trade name. The trade name is your Christian name. So if you're a Christian, this is also a religious issue. You're taking back your Christian name. I went to court and did an adult name change. I went from being Anna Maria Reisinger, all capital letters, to being Anna Maria Reisinger, upper lower case. And when the judge came around, he looked at this kind of sideways and he says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm taking back my Christian name." And that was it. That was the end of the entire argument. Boom, right there. You don't need any other excuse for taking back your name to upper lowercase. Now, if you want to go and do that and do an adult name change, you can do that. In most places it's anywhere from $150 to $300 and something like 6 weeks of process time to do that. I did that because I knew that I was going to be in some intense court battles and I was going to be facing a lot of flack. I think that for Joe Average, who's not going to be in the center of a fight, that the deed of reconveyance that we provide on my website is more than sufficient to make your claim. I don't think everybody can or should have the extra burden of going through an actual court process. But the reason I did it, I wanted something in my hand that proved that they had moved that name back to me, that I had it in my possession, that it was not in any trust or caretaking capacity of the state of, in my case, Alaska. I was stealing back my own trade name, and then I reconveyed it. So that is a closed loop. I got the court order making the change back to the Christian name, upper lowercase. I went and recorded my deed of reconveyance, my acknowledgement, my acceptance, and my deed of reconveyance to the land and soil of Wisconsin, where I was born, with the Alaska Land Recording Office. Then I went back to the court with a certified copy of my recording and put it in the case file. So I got the court to officially change the name back to the upper lowercase. I recorded that, reconveyed it to the land and soil, then I took a certified copy back to the court and had them put it in the name change file so that they were fully and duly noticed. There's absolutely no way that they can claim that they have any more attachment to my name or that they were not given due notice. And that's what I call closing the circle. Wrapping it all up so everybody has due notice. So depending on your situation and how much property you have, I mean, if you're a multimillionaire and you've got, a gazillion acres of property or you've got businesses that you own, you might want to go get an actual name change back to your upper lowercase name. Otherwise, if you're an average person and you're just living your life and want to be left alone, do the reconveyance and let it be good enough, because that will be good enough for most purposes. I'm describing my process and what I went through and why I went through it for you so that you know that that option is out there, depending upon your own situation. So, what to do with all of these tax things? Now, these guys here have developed a wonderful option for you guys to consider in dealing with the IRS. I simply revoked my election to pay. When you first sign a 1040 for the first time, you are signing what's called a novation contract. That's never told to you, and it's very sneakily added to the paperwork. But basically, a novation contract is a contract that is self-perpetuating. If you file it once, there's a presumption that you're going to file the next year, and the next year, and the next year. Let me give you kind of a brief history of the IRS. The IRS The first income tax ever recorded was in the early 1100s in France and England, and it was called Peter's Pence. And it was a tax levied by the Catholic Church to pay for the costs of the Crusades. And it was collected on the 15th of April every year by members of the Dominican order who wore black robes and were members of the Inquisition. Not much has changed, huh?
What year did they start doing that?
1135 AD. And it remains a voluntary tax. You've probably heard or seen clips where some IRS official will be standing there blinking their eyes and looking confused and saying, but this is a voluntary tax. We're going to take 45% of your earned income, and it's all voluntary. Right? Right. Well, technically it is voluntary. It's just that it was never fully disclosed to you, and you didn't know that you had a choice, and you didn't know how to exercise that choice, and nobody told you, and that's for darn sure. You have the right to revoke your election to pay the income tax if you are Joe Average and are not a federal employee or federal dependent. Now, I don't know right off the top of my head what the citation in the IRS code is, but you don't even have to recite that. What you need to do is send a letter to both the Commissioner of the IRS and the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. There are two. Again, we're dealing with duplicitous names. I mean, who would think that the Commissioner of IRS was different than the Commissioner of Internal Revenue Service? But there are two separate offices, and you have to notify both of your revocation of election to pay federal income taxes. Most of us have never been subject to federal income taxes. And most of us were subscribed under provisions that happened after World War II. My mother, who just recently died at age 96, remembered when all of this went down. It was during the war, the Second World War, and Congress came up with the victory tax. It was called the victory tax. And patriotic Americans could voluntarily sign up to pay a portion of their wages, the same as federal employees, for the war effort. And this was done during the war, so there was not a specific end date attached to the program, the victory tax program. It just said at the end of hostilities. Now, by my clock, the Second World War ended in September of 1945 with the final peace treaty between the Imperial Japanese government and the Allies, right? But Congress never went back and actually established an end date for the victory tax. They just kept right on rolling and collecting. And then they went right into the Cold War, right? And then they went into the war on war, and the war on drugs, and the war on poverty, and the war on blah, 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 blah. So that's what they're using as their excuse for continuing to pick your pockets every year. And that's why every president makes a declaration of some kind of war on something. And that's why every president makes a declaration of emergency, national emergency. We just had Donald Trump do it this year. It's so they can keep this ball rolling, and they can keep using military courts, and they can keep using military-style government at the territorial level. Now we, on the land, we've been at peace for 150 years. We haven't gone to war. Land jurisdiction of this country hasn't been at war in 150 years. It's all been the territorial government and the municipal government. We're completely peace-loving. President Andrew Johnson, who was the vice president that took over after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, declared 3 times on the public record that the land jurisdiction was at peace. The land jurisdiction is still at peace. When you sign up and you are in the federal civilian service or military service, you're in a different status. You're working for a different country, in effect. So when you join the service, you are accepting federal citizenship. And as we all know, when you join the service, you're under the rules of the service, right? Suddenly you have to take orders. You have to obey every title and jot of the military code. And you're subject to the military justice code and all of that, right? Well, there's a presumption, since you're not on the land and your name is still at sea, that you're under territorial jurisdiction and that you have to obey their military code.
Well, Anna, when you join the military, you're joining the United States Army, the United States Navy, not the United States of America's Army.
Right, exactly. So that's where the dual citizenship comes in. And since the Vietnam War, you don't even properly get discharged when you leave the service. Most people come out of the service, they get their DD-214, they think, okay, that's that. I'm back in civilian status. I'm wearing my civvies. Okay, I don't have to salute anymore. But in fact, they're never discharged unless they absolutely, again, write a letter to the head of their branch service and say, here attached is a carbon copy of my DD-214. I have, as of this date, whenever date that is or was, returned to my birthright political status as a national of Texas or Michigan or wherever you were born. Just like you write a letter to the IRS commissioners and tell them, I revoke my election to pay federal taxes. It's the same thing. You have to do it on a personal basis. And when you do this, you need to send it in a registered letter so that you have control of that mailing and you have record of it. You want a return receipt requested. And until you do, they can presume that you are still in the military. They can pull you off the street and put you right back in a uniform and send your butt off to Timbuktu. So you do have to give them notice that you're returning to your birthright political status as a civilian.
Do the court clerks, if you file stuff like that with the local court clerk, is that sufficient to get it done?
The question was, will a court clerk filing suffice? And the answer for the name jurisdiction things is no. The court clerks are territorial or municipal courts. They can't do anything about the land jurisdiction records. And you have to have your name back on the land jurisdiction. Now, there are some counties that will not record a deed of reconveyance. They don't really have a good reason for not doing it. They just say they won't. So if your county won't record your deed of reconveyance, moving your name back from the jurisdiction of the sea to the jurisdiction of the land, you find another county that will. Since these are all federated states and federated counties, it doesn't matter where you file it, just that you get it filed in the right jurisdiction, or recorded in the right jurisdiction is the proper way of saying that. So if you go down to your local land recording district office or county office and they try to obstruct your deed of reconveyance, just go down to the next county and keep looking. You'll find one. Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. My husband is a veteran, and if he goes back to do this name change, does that, will they look at this and say, okay, he gets no benefits then from the military? Does that exclude him from receiving what he's getting now?
This process, the question was, if a veteran goes and, gives notice that he's returned to civilian status, will that mean he will lose his benefits? And the answer is that no, it does not mean that you lose any benefits. None of this affects anything that you're owed. It doesn't affect your Social Security, doesn't affect your military retirement or medical benefits.
Way too loud.
This is simply returning all of this property to its proper jurisdiction. It does not affect what you're owed. So if you were vested in the Social Security system, your person is still vested in the Social Security system. If you are owed military retirement, you are still owed that retirement. Just like I could retire from GM and I could move to a different country and I would still get my benefits from GM. It's the same thing. Because remember, the territorial government is a corporation. So is the municipal government a corporation. These are just gigantic, unimaginably huge corporations. So, no, none of this process affects any federal benefits that you're owed. It just affects your status, your political status, and where you're standing, whether you're standing on the sea, or on the land, and how you're standing. Are you standing as a British citizen, or are you standing as an American? Right now, they have you all down as British. I know that sounds bizarre, but the territorial government has been run by Great Britain for 150 years, and so when you have two choices. Either you're a ward, a lawful ward as an American in international jurisdiction, and they have to, under the delegated powers, they have to act as your trustee when you are in international jurisdiction, when you are in a delegated portion of international jurisdiction. So you should be safe. Okay.
Okay, say I go ahead and do my name change, and I send off to the IRS. I don't owe taxes, but I want to tell them that I don't want to ever want them to withhold any taxes or pay taxes. What my standing would be in the federal government, the IRS.
Well, you won't have any trouble from them. What you'll
Okay. But what I'm getting to is, all these years that I paid taxes and filled out that 1040, and I did not know because I was not informed that it was voluntary, Is there any way that I could recoup all the money that I have put into the federal government?
Yes.
Good.
The amount of money that's owed to each one of us is absolutely astronomical. It's unimaginable. Because it's not just what they owe to us, it's what they owe to our great-grandparents and our parents. Virtually everything that you can think of has been rolled forward in generation-skipping trusts. Now, what a generation-skipping trust does is it protects assets from taxation. It's a way of shielding assets. And basically what it does is it knocks it forward to the next generation. So if you just go along with the program as it is now established, all of the money that you're owed, that you paid in for mortgages, and that you paid in for taxes that you didn't know, all of that is going to be reinvested by gigantic investment funds. That's all going to get knocked down the road to the next generation. But if they don't know any more than you did and they don't claim it, it's just going to keep rolling and rolling and rolling. And nobody who's alive, except the pension fund managers and the politicians, will ever see any benefit from it.
Steve here from San Antonio. Everybody hear me? Now, why don't you go over to the mic?
This may be common amongst people having legal name changes already. Obviously, I would be reconveying my birth name as opposed to my new legal name for being adopted.
Right.
So, how would I bind those two together? I should be focused. If I'm doing a deed of reconveyance, I'm targeting my birth name,
Right.
and then somehow adding an addendum to that process with my assumed legal name.
Right. You can have a large number of assumed names. Now, when I was born, the name I was given was Anna Maria Wilhelmina Hanna Sophia Reisinger von Reichenstein von Lettow Verbeck.
Wow, you were special.
Can you imagine being a little kid trying to learn how to spell your name? Anyway, there was no way that that moniker fit into any of these systems. So what they did is they just grabbed the first name of each segment, you know, the first name, the first middle name, and the first last name, and that was arbitrarily, for their purposes, the public name, the trade name that they seized upon. Now, years went by and I decided to become a writer of sorts, to at least to the extent that I'd write this stuff down so that people knew it. And so I took a pen name. And what I did was I just shortened my next name to von Reitz instead of von Reichenstein. So I have a pen name. And when I went through and claimed all my assumed names, I claimed my pen name and all sorts of variations and combinations, as well as my presumed birth name. So when you have a pen name or a nickname or a married name or any name that you've ever used in business at all, go ahead and claim that as an assumed name. You don't have to reconvey anything except the trade name that you were given, which is your upper lowercase first, middle, last. Once you reconvey that one, which is the name that appears on your birth certificate, only upper lowercase, once you reconvey that one, you can seize upon all of the other variations, all the uppercase variations by a certificate of assumed name. And I get this question from women quite often is, I had a maiden name and now I have a married name, or I had a maiden name, a married name, and I got divorced. And what do I do? Well, you you claim all the variations as assumed names, so that you're in control of those names if you ever get hauled into court for anything.